They called her the Ghost Duchess, the woman who married a duke and became invisible the same night. For 7 years, Ilara Whitcomb lived in a palace that felt like a tomb, married to a man who looked through her as if she were made of glass. Society whispered, servants pitied. And Rowan Blackmore, war hero, noble icon, her husband, spent every night staring at portraits of the woman who destroyed him. But ghosts can surprise you. When that woman returned with blood on her hands and vengeance in her smile, Ilara made a choice that would shatter everything. Stay until the end to see how she turned the game around. Drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. Let's go. The clock in the East Wing struck midnight, and Ilara Whitcomb stood alone in the grand library of Blackmore Hall, watching frost creep across the windows like skeletal fingers. 7 years. 7 years she'd lived in this fortress of stone and silence, and still the cold never left. Outside, snow blanketed the moorlands in suffocating white. Inside, the halls echoed with emptiness despite the army of servants who moved like shadows, eyes downcast, voices muted. They knew the rules. Everyone knew the rules. Do not disturb the Duke. Do not mention her. Do not ask the Duchess why she sleeps in separate quarters. Ilara pulled her shawl tighter and traced a finger along the spine of a leather-bound volume she'd read 3 times already. Books were her only companions here. Books, and the bitter understanding that she was a placeholder in someone else's tragedy. Your Grace? She turned to find Mrs. Helmsby, the head housekeeper, hovering in the doorway with that same expression of careful pity she'd worn for 7 years. The Duke has returned from London, Mrs. Helmsby said softly. He's gone directly to his study. He asked not to be disturbed. Of course he had. Thank you, Mrs. Helmsby, Ilara replied, her voice steady, practiced. Please have cook send up as usual. He'll have had a long journey. The housekeeper's eyes flickered with something, sympathy perhaps, or resignation. You're too kind to him, Your Grace. You've always been too kind. Ilara smiled, the same polite smile she'd perfected in this mausoleum of a marriage. Kindness costs nothing. Doesn't it? Mrs. Helmsby asked quietly, then curtsied and disappeared into the corridor. Alone again, Ilara let the smile drop. Kindness costs nothing. What a lie. Kindness had cost her everything. 7 years of her youth, her hope, her belief that maybe, someday the man she'd married might actually see her. She crossed to the window and pressed her palm against the icy glass. Beyond the estate walls, the village of Morton glowed with warm lights from cottage windows. Families gathering, fires burning, laughter, arguments, life in all its messy glory. And here she stood, Duchess of Blackmore, mistress of 10,000 acres, and a fortune that could buy kingdoms, utterly, devastatingly alone. The marriage had been arranged, of course. Her father, desperate to salvage the Whitcomb name from scandal and debt, had leapt at the opportunity when Duke Rowan Blackmore's representatives came calling. A strategic alliance, they'd said, a beneficial union for both houses. What they hadn't mentioned was that the Duke's heart had been buried with another woman's betrayal. Ilara had been 19. Rowan had been 27, already a decorated cavalry officer, already hardened by war, already shattered by the woman who'd left him standing at the altar on what should have been his wedding day. Vivian Ashcroft. Even now, 7 years later, that name hung over Blackmore Hall like a curse. The first woman Rowan had loved. The woman who'd promised him everything, who'd accepted his ring, who'd stood in this very hall wearing white lace and orange blossoms while guests gathered and champagne chilled. And then vanished. No note, no explanation, just an empty bridal suite and a scandal that had ripped through high society like wildfire. 2 months later, Rowan had married Ilara in a ceremony so cold and brief that even the priest had looked uncomfortable. No reception, no celebration, just vows spoken in monotone and a wedding night spent in separate rooms. That distance had never closed. You needn't fear me, Rowan had said on their wedding night, standing in the doorway of her chamber with his jaw tight and his eyes somewhere else entirely. I will not impose myself upon you. You'll have your freedom within these walls. I require only your discretion. Discretion. That was the word he'd used. Not partnership, not companionship, not even civility, just discretion. Code for keep up appearances, smile at society events, pretend we're not living in a beautiful lie. And Ilara, young and foolish and still clinging to some fantasy of eventual affection, had agreed. She'd thrown herself into managing the estate because someone had to, and Rowan certainly wasn't going to do it. He spent his days locked in his study or riding the moorlands until dark, and his evenings staring at the portrait gallery where Vivian's face smiled down from a painting he refused to remove. Alara had learned to be efficient, ruthlessly so. She'd reorganized the household accounts, rooted out corruption among the stewards, improved tenant housing, and quietly prevented 3 separate scandals from reaching the scandal sheets. She'd become indispensable to Blackmore's reputation, the perfect, invisible duchess who kept the machinery running while her husband nursed his wounds. And no one appreciated it. The servants pitied her. Society mocked her behind fans and champagne flutes. And Rowan barely knew she existed. A knock at the library door startled her from her thoughts. "Your Grace?" It was Thomas, one of the footmen, looking anxious. "Forgive the interruption, but there's been an incident in the village. The magistrate has requested the Duke's presence." Alara frowned. Rowan had only just returned from London. "What sort of incident?" "A fire at the old Carey farm, ma'am. No one injured, thank the heavens, but they're saying it was deliberately set. There's been tensions." She knew about the tensions. The Carey family had been feuding with the Holbrooks over a property boundary for months. Alara had tried to mediate, but without Rowan's authority backing her, both families had ignored her suggestions. "I'll inform the Duke," she said. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but—" Thomas hesitated. "His Grace has been drinking. Mr. Pemberton says he's in no state to receive visitors." Of course he wasn't. Alara made a decision. "Have the carriage prepared. I'll go to the village myself." Thomas's eyes widened. "Your Grace, it's past midnight and the roads are perfectly safe with an escort," she finished calmly. "The magistrate needs someone from Blackmore Hall, and I am a Blackmore. See to it, Thomas." "Yes, Your Grace." 20 minutes later, Alara sat in the carriage as it rumbled through the snow-covered countryside, her mind already working through possible solutions. The Carey-Holbrook feud needed to end before someone got killed. Perhaps she could convince both families to accept arbitration, or maybe restructure the property lines entirely. The carriage lurched suddenly, throwing her against the cushions. "What's happening?" she called. The driver's voice came back strained. "Someone in the road, Your Grace! They're waving us down!" Alara's hand went instinctively to the small pistol she kept hidden in her cloak, a precaution Mrs. Helmsby had insisted upon years ago. Highwaymen were rare this close to the estate, but not unheard of. "Proceed with caution," she ordered. The carriage slowed. Through the window, she could make out a figure standing in the road, small, slender, wrapped in a cloak that was far too thin for the bitter cold. A woman, young by the looks of her, shivering violently. Against her better judgment, Alara signaled the driver to stop. The door opened and a gust of freezing wind swept in along with something else. Desperation so thick it was almost tangible. "Please," the woman gasped, her voice raw. "Please, I need help. I need to speak to the Duke. It's a matter of life and death." Alara studied her carefully. The woman was perhaps 20, with dark hair plastered to her face by melting snow and eyes wide with terror. Her dress was expensive but travel-worn, and there was something about the way she held herself, like someone running from something worse than the cold. "I am the Duchess of Blackmore," Alara said quietly. "Tell me what's happened." The woman's face crumpled with relief and fear in equal measure. "My name is Catherine Marsh. My sister was married to Lord Edmund Ashcroft. She died 6 months ago. They said it was illness, but it wasn't. She was murdered. And the woman who killed her, she's coming here, to Blackmore Hall. She's coming for the Duke." Ice flooded Alara's veins. "What woman?" Catherine Marsh looked up with eyes full of ghosts. "Vivian Ashcroft, the widow." Botch. The world seemed to tilt. Alara had heard the name Ashcroft before, of course. Edmund Ashcroft was a wealthy baron who had died recently under questionable circumstances. But she'd never connected it to that Vivian, the Vivian who'd destroyed Rowan 7 years ago. "Get in," Alara said sharply. Catherine practically fell into the carriage, and Alara rapped on the ceiling. "Back to the hall, quickly." As they rumbled through the darkness, Catherine told her story in fragments between shaking breaths. Vivian had married Lord Ashcroft 3 months after abandoning Rowan at the altar. It had been a scandal at the time, the beautiful socialite who'd jilted a duke for a mere baron, but Ashcroft had been vastly wealthy, and Vivian had always been practical about such things. My sister Sarah was Edmund's daughter from his first marriage, Catherine explained, her hands twisting in her lap. She was kind, gentle. She tried so hard to get along with Vivian, but Vivian hated her, hated that Sarah would inherit part of the estate, hated that Edmund loved her. And you believe Vivian killed her? I know she did. Catherine's voice turned fierce. Sarah started getting sick last spring. The doctors couldn't explain it. She wasted away over months, and then she was gone. But before she died, she gave me this. Catherine pulled a small leather journal from inside her cloak. The pages were water-stained and fragile. Sarah kept records. Dates, symptoms, things Vivian said. She suspected the truth but was too weak to fight it. She made me promise to expose Vivian if anything happened to her. Elara took the journal carefully. By the dim light of the carriage lantern, she scanned the pages. The handwriting was shaky but precise. March 12th, Vivian insisted I take tea with her. Felt violently ill afterward. V seemed pleased. April 3rd, another tea. This time I saw her add something to my cup when she thought I wasn't looking. Powder. White powder. April 20th. I'm so weak now. Father doesn't believe me. The doctors say it's consumption, but I know what she's doing. Page after page of slow, methodical poisoning. And Lord Ashcroft? Elara asked quietly. Died 2 months after Sarah. Heart failure, they said. But he'd been perfectly healthy. Catherine's eyes blazed. Vivian inherited everything. The estate, the fortune, the title. And now she's free. A wealthy widow. Why come here? Why now? Catherine met her gaze. Because I've been asking questions. Because I went to the magistrate in London with Sarah's journal. Because I threatened to expose her. And 3 days ago, I overheard Vivian talking to her solicitor about how she was finally going to reclaim what should have been hers all along. She mentioned the Duke by name. She mentioned Blackmore Hall. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Vivian was coming back. After 7 years, she was coming back to the man she'd destroyed. Now a wealthy widow, now free to finish what she'd started. And Rowan, fool that he was, would probably welcome her with open arms. The carriage pulled up to Blackmore Hall, and Elara stepped out into the freezing night with Catherine close behind. The great house loomed above them, windows dark except for a single light burning in Rowan's study. Stay close to me, Elara told Catherine. Say nothing unless I ask you to speak. Understood? Catherine nodded. They climbed the steps and entered the grand foyer where Mr. Pemberton, the butler, waited with his usual impassive expression. Your Grace, I wasn't aware you'd left the estate. Is the Duke still in his study? Yes, Your Grace, but I need to speak with him. Immediately. Pemberton's eyebrows rose fractionally. In 7 years, Elara had never once demanded entry to Rowan's private sanctuary. Your Grace, His Grace has specifically requested. I am aware of what he's requested, Pemberton. This cannot wait. Something in her tone must have convinced him, because he stepped aside with a slight bow. Very well, Your Grace. Elara swept through the corridors with Catherine trailing behind, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd lived in this house for 7 years without ever truly confronting the man at its center. She'd accepted the silence, the distance, the careful dance of avoidance, but this was different. This was danger wearing a familiar face. She reached the heavy oak door of Rowan's study and knocked once, sharply. Silence. Then, I said I wasn't to be disturbed. His voice was rough, edged with alcohol and exhaustion. Elara opened the door anyway. The study was warm, firelight casting long shadows across walls lined with military maps and hunting trophies. Rowan sat behind his massive desk, a glass of whiskey in one hand and a letter in the other. He looked up sharply, irritation flashing across his features. And for the first time in 7 years, Elara truly looked at her husband. Rowan Blackmore was 34 now, and the years had carved him into something harder than the young cavalry officer she'd married. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair shot through with premature silver and eyes the color of winter storms. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from the war, and there was a hardness in his jaw that spoke of battles fought and lost. He was handsome in a brutal sort of way, the kind of handsome that made women whisper and men step aside. And he was looking at her like she was an unwelcome stranger. Alara. Her name sounded foreign in his mouth. What is the meaning of this? She'd practiced 1,000 speeches in her head over the years, imagined 1,000 confrontations. But now, standing in his study with Catherine Marsh behind her and a dead woman's journal in her hands, all those careful words evaporated. "We need to talk," she said simply, "about Vivian." The change was instant. His entire body went rigid, the glass freezing halfway to his lips. "What did you say?" "Vivian Ashcroft. She's coming here, Rowan. And she's dangerous." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against wood. "How dare you?" "This is Catherine Marsh," Alara continued, her voice steady despite the rage building in his eyes. "Her sister was married to Lord Edmund Ashcroft. Her sister is dead, and she has evidence that Vivian murdered her." Rowan's gaze snapped to Catherine, who flinched but held her ground. "That's absurd," he said flatly. "Edmund died of heart failure. It was in all the papers." As did his daughter, Sarah, supposedly, of consumption. Alara held up the journal. But Sarah kept records, dates, symptoms, evidence of systematic poisoning, and now Vivian is free, wealthy, and according to Miss Marsh, planning to return to Blackmore. "Get out!" The words were ice. Alara didn't move. "Rowan, I said get out!" He slammed the glass down so hard it cracked. "I will not listen to baseless accusations against the woman who destroyed you." The words burst out before she could stop them. "The woman who left you at the altar and married another man 2 months later? The woman whose portrait you still keep in the gallery like some pathetic shrine?" The air in the room turned arctic. Rowan stared at her with something dangerous flickering behind his eyes. Shock, perhaps, that his invisible wife had finally found her voice. "You know nothing about it," he said quietly. "I know everything about it. I've lived in her shadow for 7 years. I've watched you torture yourself over a woman who clearly never loved you. I've held this estate together while you drowned in whiskey and memories. And now she's coming back, Rowan. And if you're too blind to see the danger, enough." His voice cracked like a whip. "You are my wife in name only, Alara. You do not get to lecture me about my past. You do not get to walk into my study and your wife in name only." She laughed, and it came out bitter and sharp. "Yes, you've made that abundantly clear, but I am still a Blackmore, and this is still my home, and I will not stand by while a murderer walks through these doors." Rowan looked at Catherine. "Is there any actual proof? Witnesses? A confession?" Catherine's voice shook. "The journal is circumstantial at best. Did anyone see her administer poison? Did any doctor confirm foul play?" "No, but—" "Then you have nothing." He turned back to Alara. "I appreciate your concern, but I will not entertain conspiracy theories based on a dead woman's paranoid scribblings." Alara felt something inside her crack. "She wrote to you, didn't she? Vivian, that letter on your desk, it's from her." His silence was answer enough. "What does it say?" Alara pressed. "That is none of your concern." "Well, it is absolutely my concern. If she's invited herself to the Harrington masquerade next week," Rowan said coldly. "As am I. As are you, I assume, since we received a joint invitation. She wishes to reconnect, to apologize for the past, to—" He stopped, jaw working. "To what?" Alara demanded. "To finish what she started? To worm her way back into your life now that she's conveniently free and wealthy? You don't know that. I know that 2 people are dead, Rowan. I know that she's a widow who poisoned her way to a fortune. I know—" "You know nothing." He was shouting now, the careful control finally shattered. "You know nothing about what happened between us. You know nothing about why she left or what she—" He stopped, breathing hard. In the silence that followed, Alara understood. He still loved her. After everything, after 7 years, after abandonment and humiliation and an entire marriage built on her ghost, he still loved Vivian Ashcroft. The realization settled over her like a burial shroud. "I see," she said quietly. "You're going to see her. At the masquerade. Yes. And if I told you that's exactly what she wants, that she's playing you, then I would say you're jealous. The word hit like a slap. Alara stood there, vibrating with a rage so pure it felt like ice in her veins. Jealous, she repeated. Of course. That must be it. Your invisible wife, who you've barely spoken to in 7 years, is suddenly jealous of the woman who destroyed you. How perfectly logical. Alara? No. She held up a hand. You want to walk back into her trap? Fine. But when she destroys you again, and she will, don't expect me to pick up the pieces. She turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? To do what I've been doing for 7 years, she said without looking back. My job. Someone has to protect the Blackmore name, since you clearly won't. She left him standing there in his study, surrounded by ghosts and whiskey and the wreckage of his own making. Outside in the corridor, Catherine Marsh waited with wide, frightened eyes. Your Grace, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. You did exactly right, Miss Marsh. Alara's mind was already racing ahead, formulating plans. Come, we have work to do. Work? If the Duke won't protect himself, then I will. She started walking, her steps quick and purposeful. Mrs. Helmsby, Pemberton! Both appeared from the shadows as if summoned. Prepare a guest room for Miss Marsh. She'll be staying with us indefinitely. And tomorrow, I want a full accounting of everyone who's been invited to the Harrington Masquerade. Guest lists, seating arrangements, everything. Pemberton blinked. Your Grace? Did I stutter? No, Your Grace. Right away. As the servants scattered, Catherine caught Alara's arm. What are you planning? Alara looked at her, this young woman who'd lost her sister to a monster, who'd risked everything to bring the truth to light, who deserved justice. I'm planning to do what I do best, Miss Marsh. I'm going to protect my husband from himself, even if he hates me for it. She thought of Rowan in his study, staring at Vivian's letter, like a drowning man clutching driftwood. She thought of 7 years in the shadows, 7 years of silence, 7 years of being the perfect, invisible Duchess. And she made a decision. The ghost has returned, she said softly, but this time she's going to find that ghosts aren't the only ones who haunt Blackmore Hall. For the first time in 7 years, Alara Whitcomb Blackmore stepped out of the shadows, and the game began. The next morning arrived with cruel brightness, winter sun glinting off snow like shattered glass. Alara stood in the morning room, Catherine Marsh beside her, as they reviewed documents spread across the mahogany table like battle plans. Because that's what they were. The Harrington Masquerade is in 6 days, Alara said, her finger tracing the guest list Pemberton had procured. 200 guests, half of London's elite society, and Vivian Ashcroft will be there, along with every gossip monger and scandal hunter in 3 counties. Catherine leaned over the papers, her face pale but determined. What's your plan? To make sure she doesn't get within 10 feet of Rowan without witnesses. Alara pulled out another sheet, a floor plan of Harrington Manor. The masquerade will be held in the grand ballroom here, with adjoining galleries and private parlors. Too many blind corners. Too many opportunities for private conversations. You think she'll try to manipulate him? I think she'll do exactly what she's always done. Play the victim, spin a tragic tale about why she left, and watch him fall right back into her web. Alara's jaw tightened. Men like Rowan, they carry their wounds like trophies. They think suffering proves love. It makes them easy marks. You speak like you know him well. I don't. The admission tasted bitter. I've lived with him for 7 years and I don't know him at all. But I know men like him. War heroes with broken hearts. They're addicted to the pain because at least it proves they can still feel something. Catherine studied her carefully. Forgive me for saying so, Your Grace, but you sound like a woman who's been fighting a ghost for a very long time. Alara met her gaze. Because I have been, and I'm tired of losing. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Helmsby entered with a curious expression. Your Grace, Lady Thornbury is here to see you. Alara's eyebrows rose. Margaret Thornbury was one of society's most formidable matrons, a woman who collected secrets like other people collected china, and who could destroy a reputation with a well-placed whisper. Show her in. Lady Thornbury swept into the room in a cloud of expensive perfume and fox fur, her sharp eyes taking in everything at once, the documents, Catherine's presence, Ilara's unusual intensity. "Duchess," she said warmly, though her gaze was calculating, "forgive the unannounced visit, but I was simply dying to speak with you about the masquerade." "Of course, Lady Thornberry. May I offer you tea?" "How civilized." The older woman settled into a chair with practiced grace. "Though we both know I'm not here for pleasantries, I'm here because the entire ton is buzzing about Vivian Ashcroft's return, and I wanted to see how the Duke's wife was taking the news." So the vultures were already circling. Ilara smiled pleasantly. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Oh, don't play coy, darling. It's beneath you." Lady Thornberry accepted the tea Ilara poured with a nod of thanks. "Vivian's been telling everyone who'll listen that she and the Duke had a terrible misunderstanding years ago, and she's been simply heartbroken ever since. She's painting herself as the tragic heroine who made a youthful mistake." "How convenient for her," Ilara said mildly. "Isn't it? Of course, those of us with functioning memories recall that she jilted the Duke at the altar and married Ashcroft for his money 2 months later. But apparently that's all ancient history now that she's a wealthy widow." Lady Thornberry sipped her tea. "The question everyone's asking is, what will the Duke do when he sees her again?" Catherine shifted uncomfortably beside Ilara, but remained silent. "My husband will do as he sees fit," Ilara replied. "As will I." "Ah." Lady Thornberry's eyes gleamed. "Now that sounds interesting. You're not planning to simply stand by and watch this unfold, are you?" "Should I?" "Most women in your position would. They'd retreat to the country with their dignity intact and let the scandal play out." The older woman leaned forward. "But you're not most women, are you, Duchess? You've been running this estate like clockwork for years while your husband brooded. You've prevented more scandals than I've had hot dinners. And you've done it all without a single word of complaint or recognition." Ilara said nothing, but her silence was telling. Lady Thornberry smiled. "I'll be frank with you, my dear. I can't stand Vivian Ashcroft. She's a calculating little viper who's left a trail of broken hearts and empty wallets in her wake. If you're planning something to expose her, you'll have my full support." "And what would that support look like?" "Information, access, witnesses." The older woman set down her teacup. "I know things about Vivian that would make your hair curl. Her time in Paris after she left Ashcroft. The men she entertained. The debt she accumulated. Edmund Ashcroft wasn't her first wealthy target, and I doubt the Duke would be her last." Catherine couldn't stay silent anymore. "Did you know Sarah Ashcroft? Edmund's daughter?" Lady Thornberry's expression softened fractionally. "I did. Sweet girl, her death was a tragedy. It was murder." The room went still. Lady Thornberry looked at Catherine with new interest. "That's quite an accusation." "It's the truth." Catherine pulled out Sarah's journal. "My sister documented everything. Vivian poisoned her over months." The older woman took the journal and read in silence, her face growing darker with each page. When she finally looked up, her expression was granite. "This needs to reach the authorities." "I tried," Catherine said bitterly. "The magistrate in London said there wasn't enough evidence without witnesses or a confession. He said grieving sisters often see conspiracies where there's only tragedy." "Of course he did. Vivian has money now. Money buys silence." Lady Thornberry handed back the journal. "But it doesn't buy loyalty, and it doesn't buy truth." Ilara made a decision. "Lady Thornberry, if I asked you to help me set a trap at the masquerade, would you?" The older woman's smile was predatory. "My dear Duchess, I thought you'd never ask." Over the next 3 days, Ilara transformed from invisible duchess to general commanding an army. She met with Lady Thornberry and a carefully selected group of society matrons, women who'd been burned by Vivian in the past, women who valued truth over scandal, women who had power and weren't afraid to use it. She coordinated with Catherine to document everything they knew about Sarah's death, organizing the evidence into a damning timeline. She studied Vivian's patterns, her tactics, the way she operated. Lady Thornberry provided a wealth of information, debts Vivian had left in Paris, affairs that had ended badly, a pattern of targeting wealthy older men who conveniently died shortly after marriage. Sarah Ashcroft hadn't been Vivian's first victim. She'd just been the first with a sister brave enough to fight back. But through it all, Rowan remained distant. He spent his days locked in his study or riding the moorlands, avoiding Alara entirely. The few times they crossed paths in the corridors, he looked through her as if she were made of smoke. It hurt more than she'd expected. On the fourth day, Alara was in the estate office reviewing tenant contracts when Pemberton appeared in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Your Grace, you have visitors. They're insistent." Before she could respond, two women pushed past him into the office. The first was a severe-looking woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and eyes like chips of flint. The second was younger, perhaps 30, with the kind of ethereal beauty that came from careful cosmetics and expensive tailoring. "Duchess Blackmore," the older woman said coldly. "I am Helena Marsh, Catherine's mother, and this is my daughter Beatrice. We've come to collect Catherine and put an end to this ridiculous charade." Alara stood slowly. "Mrs. Marsh, Miss Marsh, please, sit down." "We'll stand, thank you." Helena's voice could have frozen wine. "Where is my daughter?" "Catherine is upstairs resting. She's been through quite an ordeal." "Yes, we've heard about her ordeal. Spreading vicious lies about Lady Ashcroft, imposing on your hospitality, making a spectacle of herself." Helena's nostrils flared. "I raised her better than this." Beatrice spoke for the first time, her voice soft and cutting. "Catherine has always been prone to dramatics. Sarah's death affected her deeply. She's been seeing conspiracies everywhere." "Sarah was murdered," Alara said quietly. "Sarah died of consumption," Helena snapped. "The doctors confirmed it. This fantasy about poison is nothing more than grief-induced delusion." "Then explain the journal." "What journal could possibly—" "The journal Sarah kept documenting her symptoms, the dates she took tea with Vivian, the white powder she saw added to her cup." Alara pulled out Sarah's journal and set it on the desk between them. "This journal." Helena's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "Circumstantial nonsense. A sick woman's paranoid scribblings." "Is that what Vivian told you to say?" The question hung in the air like a knife. Beatrice's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that looked like fear. "How dare you?" Helena hissed. "Lady Ashcroft has been nothing but generous to our family. After Sarah's death, she ensured we were provided for. She helped Beatrice secure a position in society. She—" "Bought your silence," Alara finished. "How much did she pay you, Mrs. Marsh? What was the price for forgetting your daughter was murdered?" The slap came so fast, Alara didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, cheek burning, and for a moment the office was utterly silent. Then Pemberton was there, gripping Helena's arm. "Madam, I must ask you to leave immediately." "Take your hands off me." Helena wrenched free. "We're taking Catherine and leaving. She's our daughter, and you have no right to keep her here." "She came here of her own free will," Alara said, her voice steady despite the throbbing in her face. "She's an adult, and she's staying. We'll see what the magistrate says about that." "By all means, contact the magistrate. I'd be delighted to show him Sarah's journal, and the timeline we've constructed, and the pattern of wealthy men dying around Vivian Ashcroft." Helena's eyes blazed. "You're playing a dangerous game, Duchess." "No, Mrs. Marsh, I'm ending one." Alara stepped closer, her voice dropping to ice. "Your daughter Sarah was murdered. Catherine knows it. I know it. And somewhere deep down, beneath all that money Vivian paid you, you know it too. The question is, are you going to help us prove it? Or are you going to spend the rest of your life knowing you sold your daughter's justice for 30 pieces of silver?" The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Then footsteps on the stairs, and Catherine appeared in the doorway. She took one look at her mother and sister, and her face went hard. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "Not until Vivian pays for what she did." "Catherine, please," Beatrice started. "Don't," Catherine's voice cracked. "Don't tell me it was consumption. Don't tell me Sarah was just sick. I watched her die, Bea. I held her hand while she wasted away, and I know what Vivian did." Helena's composure finally cracked. "You foolish girl, do you have any idea what you're risking? Vivian has power now, money, influence. She could destroy us." "She already destroyed us," Catherine shouted. "She killed Sarah, our sister, and you took her blood money and pretended it never happened. I did what I had to do to protect this family." "You did what you had to do to protect yourself." The words hung between them like shattered glass. Beatrice was crying silently, tears tracking through her powder. Helena stood rigid, her face a mask of fury and something else, guilt, perhaps, or fear. "If you pursue this," Helena said quietly, "you will do it alone. Your sister and I will testify against you if necessary. We'll say you're delusional. We'll say, I know what you'll say." Catherine's voice was hollow. "You'll say whatever Vivian tells you to say, just like you have been." Helena turned to Alara. "Mark my words, Duchess. This will end badly for all of you. Vivian Ashcroft is not a woman to be crossed." "Neither am I," Alara replied. Helena swept out of the office with Beatrice trailing behind her like a ghost. In the silence that followed, Catherine sank into a chair, shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to witness that." "Don't apologize." Alara knelt beside her. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" "My own mother just disowned me." "Your mother made her choice. You made yours. And yours is the one you'll be able to live with." Catherine looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why risk everything to help me?" Alara thought about 7 years in the shadows. 7 years of being invisible while Vivian's ghost ruled Blackmore Hall. 7 years of watching Rowan destroy himself over a woman who'd never deserved him. "Because someone has to," she said simply. "And because if Vivian gets away with this, she'll do it again, to someone else, in some other house. And I won't have that blood on my hands." What? That evening, Alara was in her chambers preparing for dinner when Rowan appeared in her doorway. She hadn't heard him approach, and the sight of him standing there, still in his riding clothes, windblown and tense, made her heart skip despite everything. "We need to talk," he said. "Do we?" She turned back to her mirror, fastening an earring with steady hands. "I was under the impression you'd said everything you needed to say the other night." "Helena Marsh came to see me. She said you're harboring her daughter, that you're planning some kind of ambush at the Harrington masquerade." "Did she?" Alara met his gaze in the mirror. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her she was mistaken, that my wife would never involve herself in something so reckless." "Then you don't know your wife very well." He stepped into the room, and she could smell winter air and horse and something else. Whiskey, probably. "Alara, whatever you're planning, stop. Vivian is a murderer," she finished, turning to face him. "She killed Sarah Ashcroft, probably Edmund too. And before them, how many others? Lady Thornbury has evidence of at least 3 other wealthy men who died under suspicious circumstances after becoming involved with her." "Speculation, gossip." "Facts," Alara corrected. "Sarah kept a journal. Catherine has witnesses who saw Vivian purchasing arsenic in Paris. And if we dig deeper, I'm certain we'll find a pattern that would make a magistrate very interested." Rowan's jaw worked. "Why are you doing this?" "Because she's dangerous." "That's not what I asked." He moved closer, and Alara forced herself not to step back. "Why do you care? You've spent 7 years in this house barely speaking to me. You've made it clear you want nothing to do with my past. So why now? Why involve yourself in something that could destroy your reputation?" The question hung between them, raw and honest. Alara could have lied, could have claimed nobility or justice or any number of righteous motivations. Instead, she told him the truth. "Because I'm tired of being invisible." The words came out quieter than she'd intended, but they carried the weight of 7 years behind them. "I've spent 7 years managing this estate, protecting your name, cleaning up your messes. I've been the perfect duchess. Silent, efficient, forgettable. And for what? So you could pine after a woman who destroyed you? So I could watch you drink yourself into oblivion every night while her ghost sat between us at every meal?" Rowan's face had gone very still. "I've had enough," Alara continued, her voice strengthening. "Vivian Ashcroft is coming here to finish what she started. She's going to play you like a violin, take whatever she wants, and leave you shattered again. And this time, I won't pick up the pieces. This time, I'm going to make sure everyone sees exactly what she is. And if you're wrong," his voice was low, dangerous, "if she's genuine, if she truly wants to make amends, then I'll apologize and spend the rest of my life living with the consequences. But I'm not wrong, Rowan. Deep down, you know I'm not." They stood there in the fading light, years of silence stretching between them. Finally, Rowan spoke. "If you do this, if you expose her at the masquerade, and you're wrong, It will destroy us. Society will crucify you. They'll say you're jealous, vindictive, unhinged. I know. They'll say I can't control my own wife, that the Blackmore name has become a joke. I know that too. And you're willing to risk it anyway. It wasn't a question, but she answered it. Yes. He studied her face as if seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, not just the convenient ghost he'd married to fill an empty space. I can't support this, he said finally. I won't help you destroy her. I'm not asking you to. Alara lifted her chin. I'm asking you to stay out of my way. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or reluctant respect. You've changed, he said softly. No, I've just stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, Alara, I never meant for things to be like this between us. I never meant to make you invisible. But you did. The words hung in the air like an accusation and an epitaph all at once. Rowan left without another word. Alara stood alone in her chambers, watching the last light fade from the windows, and felt something inside her crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. The masquerade was in 2 days, and she was going to war. The night before the masquerade, Alara gathered her allies in the morning room. Lady Thornbury had brought 3 other society matrons, Lady Ashford, Mrs. Sinclair, and the Duchess of Pemberton. Catherine sat beside Alara, pale but determined. Ladies, Alara began, tomorrow night we will attend the Harrington masquerade, and tomorrow night we will expose Vivian Ashcroft for what she truly is. How? Lady Ashford asked. She was a sharp-faced woman in her 60s who'd lost a nephew to one of Vivian's schemes. We can't simply accuse her in the middle of a ballroom. We need proof. We have proof. Alara laid out Sarah's journal, the timeline, the evidence of arsenic purchases. We have documentation. We have witnesses. What we need is a confession. Vivian will never confess, Mrs. Sinclair said flatly. She will if she thinks she's won. Alara pulled out a letter, one she'd spent all afternoon composing. Tomorrow night, I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. I'm going to step aside and let her have Rowan. The room erupted in protest. You can't be serious. That's surrender. She'll destroy him. No, Alara said calmly, her voice cutting through the chaos. She'll think she's destroyed him. She'll think she's won. And when her guard is down, when she's gloating about her victory, she'll reveal herself. Lady Thornbury's eyes gleamed with understanding. You're setting a trap. I'm setting a stage. Vivian is an actress who can't resist a grand performance. If we give her an audience and the illusion of victory, she'll show us exactly who she is. The Duchess of Pemberton leaned forward. What do you need from us? Witnesses, documentation, and timing. Alara looked around the table. When Vivian reveals herself, I need you all to be there. I need you to hear it, see it, and testify to it. Because this time, there will be no buying silence. This time, justice will be served. Catherine gripped Alara's hand. Thank you. For Sarah. For doing what I couldn't. You did more than you know, Alara said gently. You brought me the truth. Now we just have to make sure everyone else sees it. Toad. The morning of the masquerade dawned cold and bright. Alara spent the day in careful preparation. She chose her gown with precision, deep emerald silk that made her eyes look like cut glass, with a black lace overlay that whispered secrets with every movement. Her mask was simple but elegant, leaving her mouth and chin exposed. She wanted Vivian to see her smile. As afternoon faded into evening, Alara stood before her mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. 7 years ago, she had been a frightened girl playing at being a duchess. Now she was something else entirely. A knock at the door. Mrs. Helmsby entered with a package. This arrived for you, Your Grace, from London. Alara opened it to find a small glass vial and a note in Lady Thornbury's distinctive hand. The arsenic Vivian purchased in Paris. Identical to what killed Sarah. Keep it safe. It's evidence. Alara tucked the vial carefully into her reticule. The carriage arrived at 7. Rowan was already inside, dressed in severe black with a silver mask that made him look like a dark angel. He said nothing as she settled across from him, the silence stretching taut between them. As they rolled through the frozen countryside toward Harrington Manor, Alara watched her husband from beneath lowered lashes. He was nervous. She could see it in the way his jaw worked, the way his fingers drummed against his knee. He was nervous about seeing Vivian again. The realization should have hurt. Instead, it only strengthened her resolve. "Rowan," she said quietly. He looked up, startled that she'd spoken first. "Whatever happens tonight, know that I did what I thought was right." His eyes searched her face, looking for meaning. "Alara, what are you—" "Just trust me," she interrupted. "For once, just trust me." Before he could respond, the carriage pulled up to Harrington Manor. The great house blazed with light, music spilling from every window. Hundreds of guests streamed through the entrance, a river of silk and jewels and secrets hidden behind elaborate masks. Alara stepped down from the carriage and took Rowan's offered arm. Together, they walked into the lion's den. The ballroom was a riot of color and sound, crystal chandeliers casting rainbow light across dancers, champagne flowing like water, and everywhere the dangerous energy of people wearing masks and pretending to be someone else. Alara scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces. She spotted Lady Thornbury near the orchestra, the Duchess of Pemberton by the terrace doors, Mrs. Sinclair and Lady Ashford positioned strategically near the refreshment tables. Her allies were in place. Now she just needed to find Rowan. The voice cut through the music like a knife through silk. Everyone in their immediate vicinity went still. Alara turned slowly, and there she was, Vivian Ashcroft. She was beautiful, devastatingly so. Golden hair piled in artful curls, blue eyes wide and luminous behind a delicate white mask, and a gown of pale pink that made her look like an innocent debutante instead of a woman with blood on her hands. She glided toward them with practiced grace, her gaze locked on Rowan with an intensity that was almost physical. "Vivian," Rowan breathed, and Alara heard everything she needed to in that single word. He still loved her. After everything, he still loved her. Vivian's eyes flicked to Alara, dismissive and cold, before returning to Rowan. "I wasn't sure you'd come. After all these years, I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." Rowan seemed unable to form words. Alara watched the woman who'd haunted her marriage for 7 years and felt a strange calm settle over her. This was it. The beginning of the end. Vivian smiled, soft and sad and perfectly calculated. "Might we speak privately? There's so much I need to explain, so much I need you to understand." "Of course," Rowan said immediately. And just like that, Alara became invisible again. But this time, she'd planned for it. "Actually," Alara said, her voice light and pleasant, "I think that's a wonderful idea. You two clearly have much to discuss. I'll just make myself scarce." Both Rowan and Vivian looked at her in surprise. "Alara," Rowan started. "No, truly, I insist." She smiled at Vivian with perfect politeness. "After all, some conversations are meant to be private, aren't they, Lady Ashcroft?" Vivian's eyes narrowed fractionally, searching for the trap. But Alara's expression remained pleasant, unconcerned, the perfect portrait of a wife who knew when to step aside. "How understanding of you," Vivian said slowly. "I've always believed in giving people what they need," Alara replied. She squeezed Rowan's arm gently. "Take your time. I'll be fine." She walked away before either could respond, heading toward the terrace doors. Behind her, she heard Vivian say something soft to Rowan, heard his murmured response. And she smiled, because Lady Thornbury was already moving into position, ready to follow them at a discreet distance. Because Catherine was waiting in the gardens with a magistrate Alara had personally contacted. Because every piece was on the board, and the game was finally in motion. Alara stepped onto the terrace and breathed in the freezing night air. Somewhere in the gardens below, her husband was walking into a trap with the woman who'd destroyed him. And Alara was going to make sure this time he walked out whole. The ghost had returned. But she'd made one fatal mistake. She'd underestimated the woman who'd been living in her shadow. And that mistake was going to cost her everything. The terrace doors closed behind Alara with a soft click, sealing her off from the warmth and music inside. She stood perfectly still, counting heartbeats, waiting for Lady Thornbury's signal. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Through the glass, she could see Vivian leading Rowan toward one of the private parlors off the main ballroom, exactly as they'd predicted. Lady Thornbury followed at a careful distance, her peacock blue gown making her easy to track in the crowd. A flash of white lace at the garden entrance, Catherine giving the signal that the magistrate was in position. Everything was moving according to plan. Elara descended the terrace steps into the frozen gardens, her breath misting in the air. The formal hedges created a maze of shadows and moonlight, perfect for concealment. She moved quickly but carefully, her silk skirts whispering against stone pathways. "Your Grace." Catherine emerged from behind a marble statue, her face pale in the moonlight. Beside her stood a stern-looking man in his 50s, Magistrate Cordwell, the one incorruptible judge in London who couldn't be bought by Vivian's money. "Is he willing?" Elara asked without preamble. Cordwell nodded grimly. "Lady Thornbury showed me the evidence. The journal, the timeline, the arsenic purchases. If what you've told me is true, Lady Ashcroft is guilty of at least 2 murders. If we can prove it. That's the difficulty, isn't it? Without witnesses to the actual poisoning or a confession, any prosecutor would struggle to make the charges stick." His eyes were hard. "Which is why I agreed to this unorthodox arrangement. But understand, Duchess, if this goes wrong, if she claims entrapment or coercion, the case falls apart." "She won't claim anything," Elara said quietly, "because she won't know we're listening until it's too late." She led them through the gardens to a small alcove that backed directly onto the private parlor where Vivian had taken Rowan. The parlor's windows opened onto this section of the garden, a design feature meant to provide fresh air during summer parties. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose. They positioned themselves in the shadows, close enough to hear through the partially open window, far enough to remain unseen. Inside the parlor, candlelight flickered across expensive wallpaper and velvet furniture. And there, framed like a painting, stood Vivian and Rowan. She'd removed her mask. Her face was turned up toward his, eyes shimmering with unshed tears that caught the light like diamonds. "I've dreamed of this moment for 7 years," Vivian said, her voice carrying clearly through the window. 7 years of regret, of wishing I could take it all back. Elara's jaw clenched. Even now, even knowing what the woman was, the performance was flawless. Rowan stood rigid, his mask still in place. "You married Ashcroft 2 months after you left me. That doesn't suggest much regret." "I was terrified, don't you see?" Vivian reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "Your family, the expectations, the weight of being a duchess? I was so young, Rowan, I panicked. So you ran to another man's arms." "I ran to safety. Edmund was older, established. He didn't expect me to be anything more than decorative. With you, I would have had to be worthy of you, and I knew I wasn't." A single tear traced down her cheek. "I've paid for that cowardice every day since." "Have you?" Rowan's voice was rough. "Because from where I stood, you seemed quite content in your marriage." "Content? I was miserable. Edmund was kind, but he wasn't you. No one could ever be you." Vivian's voice broke perfectly, and then when he died, when I was finally free, I knew I had to try. I had to see if there was any chance you could forgive me. In the garden, Catherine made a small sound of rage. Elara touched her arm warningly. "Not yet." Rowan finally pulled his hand away. "Why now, Vivian? Why after all this time?" "Because life is short. Because I've watched too many people I love die." Something flickered across her face, satisfaction perhaps, quickly masked. "Edmund's daughter, Sarah, her death was terrible. It made me realize how precious time is." Catherine's breathing went sharp and fast. Elara gripped her hand tighter. "I heard about Sarah," Rowan said carefully. "Consumption, wasn't it?" "Yes. So sudden, so tragic." Vivian's expression was perfectly composed. "Though between you and me, I sometimes wondered if it wasn't something else. The poor girl wasted away so quickly." The admission hung in the air like poison. "What do you mean?" Rowan asked. "Oh, nothing concrete, just she and I never quite got along. She resented me for marrying her father. Young people can be so dramatic about such things." Vivian moved closer to Rowan, her voice dropping to something intimate. "But I didn't ask you here to discuss ancient history. I asked because I need to know. Is there any chance for us? Any possibility of starting again?" "I'm married, Vivian." to a woman you don't love, to a marriage of convenience. She touched his face. I've watched you from afar, Rowan. I've heard the whispers. Everyone knows you and the Duchess barely speak, that you live separate lives, that she's more housekeeper than wife. Alara felt the words like knife wounds, but she forced herself to remain still. She's been good to me, Rowan said quietly. She's been invisible, as any sensible woman would be, married to a man who's clearly in love with someone else. Vivian's smile was gentle, understanding, absolutely calculated. You never stopped loving me, did you? The silence stretched. Then, no. The word fell like a stone into still water. Vivian's triumph was subtle but unmistakable. Then leave her. Divorce her. It will be a scandal, but we'll weather it together. We'll go abroad for a year, let society's memory fade, and then return as husband and wife, as we should have been all along. And if she contests it, she won't. What woman would fight to keep a husband who doesn't want her? Vivian's voice turned sharp for just a moment before softening again. Besides, I'm sure we could come to an arrangement, a generous settlement, a comfortable house somewhere quiet. She strikes me as the practical sort. Catherine was shaking with rage. Magistrate Cordwell's expression had turned to stone. But they needed more. They needed her to incriminate herself completely. As if reading Alara's thoughts, Rowan asked the crucial question. What about Edmund? Did he know about us? Of course not. Edmund knew I'd been engaged before, but I never told him to whom. He was jealous enough as it was. Vivian's laugh was light, dismissive. Honestly, toward the end, he became quite difficult. Paranoid. He accused me of all sorts of nonsense. What kind of nonsense? Oh, you know how old men get. He thought I was trying to poison him. She said it casually, as if discussing the weather. Can you imagine? As if I would do something so pedestrian. There it was. The slip. Magistrate Cordwell leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Rowan had gone very still. Did he have reason to suspect you? Don't be ridiculous. He died of heart failure. The doctors confirmed it. Vivian waved a hand dismissively. Though I suppose the arsenic I used on Sarah might have made him paranoid if he'd found out about that. The words hung in the candlelit room like a death sentence. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Vivian seemed to realize what she'd said. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes widening in manufactured shock. Oh, that came out wrong. What I meant to say was, you killed her. Rowan's voice was hollow. You killed Sarah Ashcroft. No, you misunderstood. I was joking, making light of Edmund's paranoid accusations. You said arsenic. You said you used it on Sarah. Vivian's mask of gentle tragedy cracked. Beneath it, something cold and calculating emerged. You're twisting my words. Am I? Rowan removed his mask slowly, and his face was terrible to behold. Or are you finally showing me who you really are? Rowan, please, you have to understand. She was going to ruin everything. Edmund was going to leave half his fortune to her, and I'd spent 2 years playing the devoted wife to that boring old fool. I earned that money. Her voice rose, the careful composure shattering. Sarah was weak, pathetic. She would have wasted it on charity and good works. I put her out of her misery. And Edmund? Edmund was easy. A little powder in his evening brandy, a few weeks of escalating doses, and his heart simply gave out. The doctors suspected nothing. She laughed, high and brittle. Men are such fools. They never suspect the woman who brings them their drinks with a smile. In the garden, Magistrate Cordwell was already moving, signaling to the constables he'd positioned around the perimeter. But Alara held up a hand, stopping him. Not yet. There was one more thing. Inside, Rowan had stepped back from Vivian, his face ashen. Why are you telling me this? Because I love you! The words burst out raw and desperate. Because you're the only person who's ever mattered. Don't you see? Everything I've done, every sacrifice I've made has been to get back to you. You murdered 2 people. I removed obstacles. Sarah was nothing, and Edmund was ancient. They didn't matter. She grabbed his arms, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his coat. We matter. You and I. We always have. And now we can finally be together without anyone standing in our way. What about Alara? The question stopped Vivian cold. What about her? She released him, smoothing her gown. She's a minor inconvenience. We'll handle her the same way I handled. She stopped, awareness finally dawning. Why are you asking about her? Because, unlike you, I'm not a monster. You don't love her. You barely know she exists. That doesn't mean I want her dead. Vivian's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. Dead? Rowan, honestly, I'm not going to kill your wife. That would be far too suspicious. No, a quiet divorce will suffice. Though if she proves difficult, the threat hung unspoken in the air. That was enough. Alara stepped out of the shadows and through the parlor's garden entrance. I'm afraid I'm going to be quite difficult indeed, she said calmly. Vivian spun around, her face going white. You. Me. Alara moved into the candlelight, and she saw herself reflected in Vivian's eyes, no longer invisible, no longer a ghost. Hello, Lady Ashcroft. Thank you for the confession. It was even more damning than I'd hoped. Behind her, Magistrate Cordwell entered with 3 constables. Catherine followed, her face fierce with vindication. Vivian's gaze darted between them, calculating, searching for escape. This is entrapment. Nothing I said will hold up in court. On the contrary, Cordwell said coldly, you confessed to 2 murders in front of witnesses, including a Duke of the Realm. I'd say that will hold up quite nicely. Rowan. Vivian turned to him, desperation cracking through the facade. Rowan, please, tell them I was joking. Tell them... I heard every word, Rowan said quietly. His face was a battlefield of emotions, shock, betrayal, disgust. And I wish to heaven I hadn't. No, you don't understand. I did it for us. She reached for him, but the constables were already moving forward. Everything I did was for us, so we could be together. We will never be together. Rowan's voice was ice and ashes. You're a murderer, and I was a fool. The constables seized Vivian's arms. She fought them, her composure completely shattered now, revealing the desperate, grasping creature beneath. You'll regret this, all of you! She turned her fury on Alara. You think you've won? You think he'll suddenly love you now that I'm gone? He'll never love you. You're nothing. You've always been nothing. Perhaps, Alara said softly, but I'm the nothing that destroyed you. Vivian screamed, a sound of pure rage and frustration, as the constables dragged her toward the door. Wait! Catherine's voice cut through the chaos. She stepped forward, Sarah's journal clutched in her hands, and looked Vivian directly in the eyes. My sister was kind. She was gentle and good and everything you'll never be, and you killed her for money. Catherine's voice didn't waver. I hope you rot in hell for what you did. But before that, I hope you rot in prison, knowing that in the end, it was the women you underestimated who brought you down. Vivian's face contorted with hatred, but the constables were already hauling her from the room. As her screams faded into the distance, the parlor fell silent. Magistrate Cordwell cleared his throat. I'll need statements from all of you. And the evidence. The journal, the arsenic purchases, everything. You'll have it all, Alara promised. Every piece. He nodded and left with his men, leaving Alara, Rowan, and Catherine alone in the flickering candlelight. Catherine spoke first, her voice thick with tears. Thank you. For Sarah. For believing me when no one else would. You were braver than you knew, Alara told her gently. Your sister would be proud. Catherine nodded, wiping her eyes, and slipped from the room to find Lady Thornberry, leaving Alara alone with her husband. They stood in silence, the weight of 7 years pressing down between them. Finally, Rowan spoke. I heard what she said, about you being nothing. She wasn't wrong. Yes, she was. He moved closer, and she could see the devastation in his eyes. You were never nothing, Alara. I made you nothing. I turned you into a ghost because I was too broken to see what was standing right in front of me. And what was that? A woman strong enough to hold my entire world together while I fell apart. A woman brave enough to step into the shadows so I could nurse my wounds in peace. A woman who saved me tonight from making the worst mistake of my life. His voice cracked. Again. Alara felt something loosen in her chest, 7 years of tension beginning to unwind. I don't need your gratitude, Rowan. What do you need? The question hung between them, honest and raw. Alara thought about 7 years of silence, 7 years of being invisible, 7 years of loving a man who couldn't see her. I need to know if you can ever see me, she said finally. Not as a convenience, not as the woman who isn't Vivian, but as myself, as Alara. Rowan reached for her hand, the first time he'd truly touched her in 7 years. His fingers were warm, calloused from riding, trembling slightly. I'd like to try, he said quietly. If you'll let me. Before she could respond, the parlor doors burst open. Lady Thornberry stood in the entrance, her face pale with alarm. Your Grace, we have a problem. Vivian's mother and brother are here. They're demanding her release and threatening lawsuits. And they've brought half of London society with them. Of course. Alara should have anticipated this. The Ashcrofts were an old, powerful family. They wouldn't let one of their own be arrested without a fight. How many? She asked. 50, perhaps more. They've assembled in the ballroom. Lord Harrington is trying to maintain order, but Lady Thornberry's expression was grim. They're calling for your head, Your Grace, saying you orchestrated this out of jealousy, that you falsified evidence to destroy an innocent woman. Rowan's hand tightened on Alara's. We have witnesses. We have her confession. We have witnesses who weren't invited to the party, Alara corrected. Magistrate Cordwell, Catherine, myself. To everyone else in that ballroom, were the outsiders making wild accusations against one of their own. Then we'll explain. They won't listen. She pulled free and began to pace, her mind racing. Society protects its own. The Ashcrofts are powerful. Unless we can turn public opinion decisively against Vivian, they'll pressure Cordwell to release her. They'll find sympathetic judges. They'll bury this in legal proceedings until everyone forgets. So what do we do? Lady Thornberry asked. Alara stopped pacing. An idea was forming, dangerous, audacious, and possibly suicidal to her reputation. But it might work. We give them a show, she said slowly. If Vivian wants to play the victim, we'll force her to play it in front of everyone. No private proceedings, no quiet legal battles. We bring this into the open where lies can't hide. Rowan was shaking his head. Alara, if this goes wrong, I'll be ruined. I know. She met his eyes. But if we don't try, Vivian walks free and kills again. I can live with ruin. I can't live with that blood on my hands. A moment of silence. Then Rowan straightened, something hardening in his expression. The cavalry officer emerging from behind the broken nobleman. Tell me what you need, he said. Alara smiled. I need you to trust me, and I need you to follow my lead, no matter how mad it seems. Done. She turned to Lady Thornberry. Gather our allies, everyone who knows the truth. Have them position themselves throughout the ballroom. And find Catherine. I need her ready to speak. What are you planning? The older woman asked. A trial by society, the only kind that really matters. They moved quickly through the corridors back toward the ballroom. The sound of angry voices grew louder with each step. Through the doors, Alara could see the crowd, a sea of masked faces turned hostile, champagne glasses forgotten as they whispered and pointed. At the center stood Lord Marcus Ashcroft, Vivian's brother, a tall, aristocratic man with ice in his eyes and power in every line of his body. This is an outrage, he was shouting. My sister arrested like a common criminal, dragged from a private conversation, accused of unspeakable crimes by a jealous nobody. The crowd murmured agreement. Alara felt Rowan tense beside her, but she touched his arm gently. Wait, she whispered. Lord Ashcroft continued. The Duchess of Blackmore has manufactured this entire scandal out of spite. Everyone knows the Duke's true affections have always lain elsewhere. Rather than accept her place gracefully, she's chosen to destroy an innocent woman. Where's the evidence? Someone called. There is none. Just the word of the Duchess and some mysterious journal that conveniently appeared. Marcus's voice rang with conviction. This is a vendetta, pure and simple, and I demand satisfaction. The crowd's energy was turning ugly. Alara could feel it. The mob mentality taking hold, the desire for scandal and blood. This was the moment. She stepped into the ballroom, Rowan at her side. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, some curious, most hostile, all hungry for drama. Alara walked to the center of the floor, her emerald gown catching the candlelight. She removed her mask slowly, deliberately, letting them all see her face. Lord Ashcroft, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the sudden silence. You're absolutely right. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Rowan made a small sound of alarm beside her, but she continued. I did orchestrate tonight's events. I did arrange for your sister to be arrested, and I did so with full knowledge of the consequences. She looked around the ballroom, meeting eyes, holding gazes. So let me be very clear about why. Your sister is a murderer. Gasps and angry shouts erupted. Marcus's face went purple with rage. How dare you? I dare because I have proof. Alar's voice rose above the chaos. I have Sarah Ashcroft's journal documenting her own poisoning. I have evidence of arsenic purchases in Paris. I have a timeline of every suspicious death surrounding your sister. And I have her own confession, witnessed by multiple people, including my husband. Lies! All lies designed to... Then let's test them. Alara pulled Sarah's journal from her reticule and held it high. This is Sarah Ashcroft's journal. Her own words, written as she died. I propose we read it aloud here and now and let society judge whether I'm a jealous wife or whether I'm trying to stop a killer. The room went utterly still. Marcus's confidence flickered. That's not how justice works. There are proper channels that you'll manipulate with your money and influence until the truth is buried. Alara's gaze was steel. No. If you want to call me a liar in front of society, then let society hear all the evidence. Unless you're afraid of what it will reveal? The challenge hung in the air. Marcus looked at the crowd, at the faces now watching with genuine curiosity rather than blind support. He'd positioned himself as the defender of his sister's honor. To refuse now would look like he had something to hide. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. Read your so-called evidence. And when it proves to be nothing but circumstantial nonsense, I'll have satisfaction from both you and the Duke. Lara handed the journal to Catherine, who'd appeared at her side. Read it, she said gently. Let them hear Sarah's voice. Catherine's hand shook as she opened the journal, but when she began to read, her voice was steady and clear. March 12th. Vivian insisted I take tea with her today. I felt violently ill afterward. She seemed pleased. The ballroom was silent as a tomb. Catherine continued reading, entry after entry of systematic poisoning. The crowd's expression shifted from skepticism to horror as Sarah's words painted a picture of slow, deliberate murder. When she reached the final entry, Sarah's dying declaration that Vivian was killing her and begging someone to stop her, there were tears on many faces. Catherine closed the journal with shaking hands. Lord Ashcroft's face had gone gray. This proves nothing. A sick woman's paranoid ravings, backed by arsenic purchases. Lady Thornbury stepped forward with documents. Bills of sale from 3 different apothecaries in Paris, all under your sister's name, all within the time frame of Sarah's illness. And a pattern. The Duchess of Pemberton moved to join them. I knew Lord Hartley. He died 6 months after becoming engaged to your sister. Heart failure, they said. But he was 32 and healthy as a horse. And Lord Bexley, Mrs. Sinclair added, courted Vivian for 3 months before dying of mysterious stomach ailments. And Sir Gregory Marsh, another voice called. And Colonel Whitmore. One by one, women stepped forward from the crowd. Women who'd lost brothers, sons, friends to mysterious deaths that had always seemed suspicious but never investigated. All of them connected to Vivian Ashcroft. The weight of evidence was crushing. Marcus stood frozen, the support around him crumbling as society's finest turned on his sister like wolves, scenting blood. But the confession, someone shouted. You said you had a confession. We do. Rowan spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through the noise. Tonight, in the East Parlor, Vivian confessed to murdering both Sarah and Edmund Ashcroft. She described the method, the motive, and showed not a shred of remorse. I heard every word. As did I, Magistrate Cordwell said, entering from the side door where he'd been waiting, along with 3 constables. Her exact words were, I put her out of her misery regarding Sarah, and a little powder in his evening brandy regarding Lord Ashcroft. I've never heard a clearer confession in 20 years of service. The crowd erupted into chaos, some shouting for justice, others calling for Vivian's head, still others demanding to know how they'd been fooled for so long. Through it all, Lord Marcus stood silent, his empire of lies collapsing around him. Finally, he spoke. Even if this is all true, and I'm not conceding that it is, my sister deserves a fair trial. Not this public execution. She'll get her trial, Ilara said quietly, in a court of law where the evidence will be even more damning. Tonight was just the opening act. She looked around the ballroom, at the faces that had been so ready to destroy her minutes ago, now looking at her with something like respect. Lady Ashcroft is in custody, Magistrate Cordwell announced. She'll be transported to London tomorrow to await trial. Anyone with additional evidence regarding her crimes should contact my office immediately. The crowd began to disperse, breaking into small groups of frantic whispering. Lord Marcus approached Ilara slowly, his face unreadable. "You've destroyed my family's name tonight," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "Your sister did that the moment she chose murder. I just made sure everyone knew about it." He studied her for a long moment. "I misjudged you, Duchess. I thought you were nobody, a placeholder." "So did everyone." She smiled without humor. "That was my advantage." As Marcus walked away, Lady Thornberry appeared at Ilara's elbow. "Well," the older woman said with satisfaction, "that certainly made an impression. Half the ton will be talking about you for the next decade. Good or bad. Does it matter? You're no longer invisible." Ilara looked around the ballroom, at the wreckage of the evening, at the society that had tried to destroy her and failed, and she felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Power. Not the borrowed power of being a duchess. Real power, earned power, the kind that came from being willing to risk everything for what was right. "Your Grace." She turned to find Rowan standing there, his expression unreadable. "May I have this dance?" The question was simple. The implications were not. Around them, the remaining guests watched with avid curiosity. To dance now, after everything, would be a statement, an announcement that their marriage was not the hollow shell everyone believed it to be. Or perhaps it was a beginning. Ilara took his offered hand. They moved onto the floor as the orchestra, sensing drama, struck up a waltz. Rowan pulled her close, closer than propriety dictated, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat through the layers of silk and wool between them. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said quietly as they began to move. "And I've seen cavalry charges. I had no choice. You had every choice. You could have let it go. Let me make my own mistakes. Let Vivian destroy me again." His hand tightened on her waist. "Instead, you went to war for me." "Why?" Ilara looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time in 7 years. At the man beneath the title, the wounds beneath the armor. "Because someone had to," she said simply, "and because underneath all that stubborn grief, you're worth saving." His breath caught. They danced in silence for a moment, the ballroom fading away until there was nothing but the music and the warmth of his hand in hers. "I don't deserve you," Rowan said finally. "No," Ilara agreed. "You don't. But perhaps, given time, you'll earn me." Something shifted in his eyes. Hope, perhaps, fragile and new. "I'd like to try." "Then we'll start tomorrow, fresh, as if we're meeting for the first time. And tonight? Tonight, we finish this dance, and then we go home." The word felt strange on her tongue. Home. As if Blackmore Hall might finally become more than a beautiful prison. As if she and Rowan might finally become more than strangers sharing a name. The waltz ended. The ballroom erupted in polite applause, though whether for the dance or the evening's drama, Ilara couldn't say. She curtsied. Rowan bowed, and together they walked from the ballroom into the cold night air. Behind them, society whispered and plotted and began rewriting the story of what they'd witnessed. But Ilara didn't care. For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't thinking about what others thought. She was thinking about tomorrow, about possibility, about a marriage that might, against all odds, become something real. The carriage waited in the drive, lanterns glowing warm against the darkness. Rowan handed her inside, then paused. "Ilara," she looked back at him, silhouetted against the lights of Harrington Manor. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing what I couldn't, for being stronger than I deserved." She smiled. "Ask me again tomorrow if I regret it." And what will you say? I don't know yet. It was honest. It was real. It was a beginning. They rode home through the frozen countryside in companionable silence, the ghost of Vivian Ashcroft finally, blessedly exorcised. But neither of them saw the figure watching from the shadows of Harrington Manor's gardens. Neither of them knew that while they'd been focused on Vivian, another player had entered the game. Helena Marsh stood in the darkness, her face twisted with fury, a letter clutched in her trembling hand. A letter from Vivian, written before her arrest and delivered by a loyal servant. A letter promising Helena that if she went down, she'd take everyone with her, including evidence of Helena's own crimes, the debts she'd paid with Vivian's blood money, the lies she'd told, the daughter she'd helped destroy. Helena looked at the letter, then at the departing carriage carrying the Duchess, who'd ruined everything. And she made a choice. If Vivian was going to expose her, if her life was going to be destroyed anyway, then she'd make sure the Duchess burned first. She pulled out a second letter, this one addressed to Lord Marcus Ashcroft, and began to write. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The sun rose over Blackmore Hall with brutal clarity, winter light turning everything sharp and merciless. Alara woke in her own chambers, alone, as always, but something felt different. The silence didn't feel like abandonment anymore. It felt like possibility. She dressed quickly, choosing a practical day gown in deep burgundy, and made her way downstairs. The household was already stirring, servants moving with unusual energy. News of the previous night's events had clearly spread. Mrs. Helmsby met her in the hallway, her expression caught between concern and something that looked like pride. Your Grace, there are callers. Already, at 7 in the morning. Alara raised an eyebrow. Who? Everyone. The housekeeper handed her a silver tray stacked with calling cards. Lady Thornbury, the Duchess of Pemberton, Mrs. Sinclair, Lady Ashford, and at least a dozen others. They're assembling in the morning room like an invading army. So it had begun. Society's judgment, delivered in person over tea and carefully worded questions. Tell them I'll be down shortly. And Mrs. Helmsby? Alara paused. Have extra tea prepared. This is going to be a long morning. She found Rowan in the breakfast room, staring at a newspaper with an expression somewhere between horror and grim amusement. He looked up as she entered, and something in his face softened. Good morning, he said, the words awkward but genuine. Is it? She gestured at the paper. He turned it so she could see the headline. Duchess of Blackmore exposes murderer at masquerade. Society reels from scandal. Below it, a detailed account of the previous night's events, complete with quotes from witnesses and a damning portrait of Vivian Ashcroft. They're calling you the Iron Duchess, Rowan said quietly, the woman who brought down a killer while society danced. Better than the Ghost Duchess, I suppose. Alara. He stood, moving around the table toward her. About last night, we have visitors. She cut him off gently, not quite ready for whatever conversation he was about to initiate. Half of London society is waiting in the morning room. We should face them together. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Of course. They walked side by side through the corridors, and Alara couldn't help but notice how different it felt. Not like strangers sharing space, but like allies preparing for battle. The morning room was indeed full of society's finest matrons, all seated with teacups and predatory curiosity. Conversation stopped as Alara and Rowan entered. Lady Thornbury spoke first, her voice carrying that peculiar blend of warmth and warning. Duchess. Duke. We've come to offer our support. Support? Alara settled into a chair, gesturing for the others to sit. Or to assess the damage? Both, if we're being honest. The Duchess of Pemberton smiled wryly. What you did last night was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Society is divided on which. Let them be divided, Rowan said, surprising everyone by speaking. My wife exposed a murderer. That should be celebrated, not debated. The room went still. My wife. He'd said it with conviction, with possession, with something that sounded almost like pride. Lady Ashford leaned forward. The problem, Your Grace, is that Lord Marcus Ashcroft is not accepting defeat gracefully. He's been meeting with lawyers all night. He's claiming entrapment, coercion, and fraudulent evidence. Of course he is, Alara said calmly. His sister murdered at least 6 people. He can't admit that without his family's reputation being destroyed forever. So he'll fight. Can he win? Mrs. Sinclair asked. In court? No, the evidence is overwhelming. Magistrate Cordwell had arrived quietly during the conversation, standing in the doorway. But in the court of public opinion? That's a different battlefield. He entered fully, and Alara noticed the grim set of his features. What's happened? She asked. Helena Marsh happened. Cordwell pulled out a letter. She's filed a formal complaint against you, Duchess. Claims you coerced her daughter into making false accusations. Claims you fabricated the journal. Claims this entire affair is a vendetta orchestrated by a jealous wife. The room erupted in outrage, but Alara felt ice settle in her stomach. Helena was paid off by Vivian, she said quietly. She took blood money to stay silent about Sarah's murder. I know, but she's claiming the opposite, that you paid her to lie, and when she refused, you turned Catherine against her. Cordwell's expression was sympathetic but firm. She's a mother accusing you of destroying her family. It's a compelling narrative. It's a lie. Yes, but it's a lie that will resonate with those who want to believe the worst of you. He set the letter on the table. Lord Marcus has seized on this. He's positioning his sister as the victim of a conspiracy. You, the vengeful Duchess. Catherine, the manipulated daughter. Helena, the brave mother trying to protect her child. Rowan slammed his hand on the table. This is madness. We have Vivian's confession, which she now claims was given under duress, that she was frightened and said what you wanted to hear. Cordwell's tone was weary. The Ashcrofts have money and influence. They're using both to create reasonable doubt. Lady Thornbury's eyes glittered dangerously. Then we destroy their credibility. We expose Helena's lies, produce evidence of the blood money, which will take time, Cordwell interrupted. Time during which public opinion will shift. Time during which the Duchess's reputation will be systematically dismantled. He looked at Alara. I'm sorry, Your Grace, but you need to prepare for war. A different kind than last night. Alara felt the weight of every gaze in the room. They were waiting to see if she would crumble, if the Iron Duchess was just a mask that would crack under pressure. Instead, she smiled. Good, she said quietly. Let them come. Let the Ashcrofts throw everything they have at me, because while they're focused on destroying my reputation, they won't notice what I'm really doing. Which is? Rowan asked. Building an army. She stood, moving to the window that overlooked the estate. Helena Marsh thinks she's protecting herself by attacking me. The Ashcrofts think they can buy their way out of justice. They're both wrong, because they're still playing the old game, money and influence and careful lies. She turned back to face the room. I'm playing a new one. Truth. Witnesses. Evidence they can't buy or silence. Her gaze swept across the assembled women. Lady Thornbury, you mentioned Lord Hartley died after becoming engaged to Vivian. Did he have family? A sister, Lady Victoria Hartley. She's been living quietly in Bath since his death. Contact her. See if she noticed anything suspicious before he died. Symptoms, strange behavior from Vivian, anything. Alara turned to Mrs. Sinclair. Lord Bexley. Who inherited his estate? His nephew, I believe. Thomas Bexley. Find him. Ask about the circumstances of his uncle's death. Medical records, if possible. She continued around the room, assigning tasks, building a web of investigation. We're going to document every death connected to Vivian Ashcroft, every suspicious circumstance, every pattern. That will take weeks, Lady Ashford protested. Then we'd better start now. The Duchess of Pemberton was nodding slowly, understanding dawning. You're building a case so overwhelming that no amount of money or influence can bury it. Exactly. The Ashcrofts are fighting me. Let them. While they waste resources on attacking my character, we'll be gathering evidence that will bury Vivian so deep she'll never see daylight again. Magistrate Cordwell's expression shifted to something like respect. You're thinking like a prosecutor. I'm thinking like someone who's tired of powerful people getting away with murder. Alara's voice was steel. Vivian killed at least 6 people that we know of. How many others? How many deaths were ruled natural because no one bothered to look closer? How many families grieved without knowing their loved ones were murdered? The room fell silent. Then Lady Thornberry stood. "I'll contact Lady Victoria immediately." "I'll find Thomas Bexley," Mrs. Sinclair added. One by one, the women rose, their faces set with determination. They weren't just society matrons anymore. They were an army. After they'd dispersed with their assignments, Alara found herself alone with Rowan and Cordwell. "You realize this will consume months of your life," the magistrate said quietly. "The investigation, the trial, the appeals, the Ashcrofts won't go quietly." "I know. And your reputation may never fully recover. There will always be whispers, doubts." "I said I know." Alara met his gaze steadily. "But I'd rather be known as the woman who fought a murderer than the woman who let her walk free." Cordwell nodded and took his leave, leaving Alara alone with Rowan. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're not the woman I married 7 years ago." "No, I'm not." That woman was quiet, accommodating, invisible. That woman was terrified and alone. Alara moved to the window again, looking out at the frost-covered grounds. She thought if she just disappeared enough, maybe someday you'd notice her. Maybe someday you'd choose her instead of a ghost. Alara, but ghosts don't give up their haunting so easily, do they? So she stayed invisible, became part of the furniture, the efficient duchess who ran your estate and protected your name and asked for nothing in return. She turned to face him. Until she realized something important. What? That being invisible wasn't protecting her, it was killing her. Slowly. One silent day at a time. The words came out raw, honest. So she stopped. She stepped into the light, and maybe it will destroy her. Maybe society will crucify her, and the Ashcrofts will win, and in a year everyone will remember her as the jealous duchess who invented a conspiracy. Or she'll win, and she'll finally understand what it feels like to be real. Rowan crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was sudden, desperate, and completely unexpected. Alara stood rigid for a moment, shocked, before slowly relaxing into his warmth. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair, "for 7 years of making you invisible, for 7 years of choosing a memory over the woman standing right in front of me, for being so broken I couldn't see what I was destroying." "Rowan, let me finish." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. "I loved Vivian. Or I thought I did. But what I really loved was the pain of losing her. The wound I could nurse, the tragedy I could wear like armor. It meant I never had to risk being hurt again, never had to actually feel anything real." His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their trembling. "But watching you last night, watching you walk into that ballroom, knowing you could lose everything and doing it anyway, I felt something I haven't felt in 7 years. What? Alive." The word hung between them, fragile and true. "I don't know if I can be the husband you deserve," Rowan continued. "I don't know if I can undo 7 years of damage, but I want to try. If you'll let me." Alara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she'd never seen before. Not the broken nobleman, not the man haunted by ghosts, just Rowan. Flawed, honest, finally present. "Ask me that again in 6 months," she said softly. "After the trial. After the scandal. After we've both had time to become whoever we're going to be now. And then maybe I'll have an answer." "That's fair." He released her, stepping back, and the loss of warmth was immediate. But it felt right. Like they were finally on equal footing instead of orbiting each other like distant planets. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Pemberton entered, looking unusually flustered. "Your Grace, there's a young woman here demanding to see you. She says it's urgent. Her name is Beatrice Marsh." Alara and Rowan exchanged glances. Catherine's sister. Helena's daughter. The one who'd stood silent while her mother took blood money. "Show her in," Alara said. Beatrice entered hesitantly, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept, her expensive gown rumpled, her hair imperfectly pinned. "Duchess," she began, her voice shaking, "I know I have no right to be here. I know what my mother is doing to you. But I can't let her do this anymore." "Sit down," Alara said gently. "Tell me what's happened." Beatrice sank into a chair, her hands twisting in her lap. After you left the masquerade, my mother met with Lord Marcus. They made a plan, a strategy to destroy you before the trial. Her voice broke. They're going to claim you've been unstable for years, that you've made false accusations before. They've hired people to testify to your mental fragility. Bought witnesses, Rowan growled. Yes, and my mother is going to say that Catherine has always been prone to delusions, that Sarah's death drove her mad with grief, that she invented the journal herself. Elara felt cold fury settle in her chest. And you came here to warn me because I can't live with myself anymore. Beatrice looked up, tears streaming down her face. Sarah was my sister too. I loved her, and when she died, when I saw how Vivian looked at the funeral, like she'd won some game, I knew. Deep down I knew what had happened, but I was too afraid to say anything, too afraid of what it would cost. So you let your mother take the money? Yes, and I've hated myself every day since. She pulled a leather folder from her bag, but I kept records. Every payment Vivian made to my mother, every meeting they had, every lie mother told to protect her. She held it out with shaking hands. It's all here. Proof that my mother was paid to stay silent. Proof that Vivian knew she was under suspicion and bought her way out of it. Elara took the folder carefully. Inside were bank statements, receipts, letters, a paper trail that would demolish Helena's credibility completely. Why bring this to me? She asked quietly. Why not go to the magistrate yourself? Because I'm a coward. Beatrice's voice was hollow. Because if I testify, my mother will be prosecuted too. She'll go to prison for accepting bribes, for obstructing justice. She's my mother, and I can't be the one to destroy her. But you can give me the ammunition to do it. Yes. Beatrice met her gaze with red-rimmed eyes. I know that makes me terrible. I know I should be braver, like Catherine, but I'm not. This is the best I can do. Take the evidence, use it, destroy Vivian and my mother's lies. Just let me disappear afterward. Let me pretend I was never part of this. Elara studied the young woman in front of her, caught between loyalty and conscience, choosing the coward's path, but choosing it nonetheless. Catherine should know about this, she said finally. No! Beatrice's voice cracked with panic. Please, she already hates me. If she knew I had this evidence all along and said nothing, she deserves to know that her sister finally did the right thing, even if it wasn't for the right reasons. Silence stretched between them. Then footsteps in the hallway, and Catherine appeared in the doorway. She froze at the sight of her sister. B. Her voice was small, uncertain. What are you doing here? Beatrice stood abruptly, clutching her bag like a shield. I was just leaving. She brought evidence, Elara said calmly. Proof that your mother was paid by Vivian to stay silent. Proof that will destroy the Ashcrofts' counterattack completely. Catherine's eyes went wide. She looked at Beatrice, at the folder in Elara's hands, and understanding dawned. You knew, she whispered. All this time, you knew, and you said nothing. Catherine, I'm sorry. You stood there while Mother called me delusional. You let her take Vivian's money. Her voice broke. Sarah was your sister too. I know. Beatrice's composure shattered. I know, and I'm sorry, but I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Mother said if we went against Vivian, we'd lose everything. So you chose money over justice. I chose survival, Beatrice shouted back. Not everyone can be as brave as you, Catherine. Not everyone can throw away their family for a principle. I didn't throw away my family. You and Mother did. When you decided Sarah's life was worth less than Vivian's money. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Beatrice's face crumpled. I can't change what I did. I can't go back and be braver or better. All I can do is give you this and hope it's enough. She turned to Elara. Use it well, Duchess. Make sure Vivian pays for what she did, even if the rest of us are too broken to stand with you. She fled from the room before anyone could stop her. Catherine stood frozen, tears streaming silently down her face. Elara moved to her side, touching her shoulder gently. She did the right thing in the end. The right thing would have been to speak up when Sarah was dying, Catherine said bitterly. The right thing would have been to choose her sister over her comfort. Yes, but people are complicated. They make wrong choices for understandable reasons. That doesn't excuse them, but maybe it means they're not beyond redemption. Catherine looked at her with ancient eyes and a young face. Do you really believe that, after everything? Alara thought about 7 years of choosing silence over confrontation. 7 years of being invisible because it was easier than fighting. I believe we all make compromises to survive, she said softly. The question is whether we're willing to stop compromising when it matters most. Your sister wasn't willing, but you were. And that's the difference. They stood together in the morning light, two women who'd chosen the hard path, surrounded by the wreckage of those who hadn't. Rowan cleared his throat. What do we do with the evidence? Alara looked down at the folder in her hands, the ammunition that would destroy Helena Marsh's credibility and eviscerate the Ashcrofts' defense. We take it to Magistrate Cordwell. Today. We build a case so airtight that no lawyer in England can break it. She met Rowan's gaze. And then we wait for the trial and watch Vivian Ashcroft answer for every life she's taken. It won't bring Sarah back, Catherine said quietly. No, but it will make sure she's the last one. That has to be enough. Over the next 3 weeks, Alara transformed Blackmore Hall into a command center. Lady Victoria Hartley came forward with letters her brother had written before his death, letters describing stomach ailments and a fiancé who insisted on making all his meals. Thomas Bexley provided medical records showing his uncle's mysterious decline began shortly after Vivian entered his life. One by one, families came forward, each with a story. Each with a death that had seemed natural but now looked sinister in the pattern's light. Vivian Ashcroft hadn't killed 6 people. She'd killed 11. 11 wealthy men who'd made the mistake of falling for a beautiful face and a tragic story. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, undeniable. Lord Marcus's lawyers tried every trick, claiming entrapment, challenging witnesses, questioning evidence. But Beatrice's records proved Helena had been paid to lie. And without her testimony, their case collapsed. Helena herself fled to France rather than face prosecution. And through it all, society watched with rabid fascination. The trial was set for late February at the Old Bailey. The press called it the trial of the century. Tickets to the gallery were selling for obscene amounts. But Alara didn't care about the spectacle. She cared about justice. The night before the trial, she stood in the library at Blackmore Hall, looking at the wall where she'd mapped out every victim, every connection, every piece of evidence. Rowan found her there, 2 glasses of brandy in his hands. Thought you might need this, he said, offering her one. She accepted it gratefully. Tomorrow, it all comes to a head. Are you ready? I don't know. I've spent 3 weeks building this case. 3 weeks living and breathing every detail of Vivian's crimes. 3 weeks watching families grieve all over again as they realized their loved ones were murdered. She took a sip of brandy, letting the burn ground her. I'm tired, Rowan. I'm so tired of fighting. Then rest. You've done enough. Let Cordwell handle the trial. No. She turned to face him. I started this. I'm going to see it through to the end. Those families deserve a witness who won't back down. He studied her face in the firelight. You've changed everything, you know, not just about Vivian, about us, about me. Have I? These past 3 weeks, watching you work, watching you refuse to quit even when the Ashcrofts threw everything at you, I've seen who you really are. Not the quiet wife who disappeared into the background, the woman who was always there, just waiting for a reason to fight. He set down his glass and took her hands. I don't know what happens after tomorrow, he said quietly. I don't know if Vivian will be convicted or if some technicality will set her free. I don't know if society will ever fully accept what you've done. But I know this. I'm proud to be your husband, and I'm sorry it took me 7 years to realize what that means. Alara felt something crack open in her chest, 7 years of walls beginning to crumble. Ask me again, she whispered. What? What you asked me 3 weeks ago. About trying. About being the husband I deserve. She met his gaze steadily. Ask me again. Rowan's breath caught. Alara Whitcomb Blackmore, would you give me the chance to be the man you should have married 7 years ago? Would you let me try to earn you, even though I've done nothing to deserve it? She smiled. Not the polite society smile, but something real and warm and almost painful in its honesty. Yes, she said simply. Let's try. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like someone handling something precious they'd almost lost. And for the first time in 7 years, Alara felt like she was finally home. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Alara dressed in severe black, a duchess going to war. Rowan waited for her at the foot of the stairs, equally formal, equally ready. Together, they rode to the Old Bailey. The crowd outside was massive, hundreds of people craning for a glimpse of the principals in the scandal that had consumed society for weeks. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every inch of standing room claimed. And there, in the defendant's box, sat Vivian Ashcroft. She looked smaller than Alara remembered, paler. Her beauty was still there, but it had turned brittle, desperate. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Vivian's gaze was pure hatred. Alara smiled. The trial lasted 4 days. 4 days of testimony from doctors, family members, witnesses who'd seen Vivian purchase arsenic or heard her make suspicious comments. 4 days of Catherine reading Sarah's journal aloud, her voice never wavering. 4 days of Magistrate Cordwell methodically dismantling every lie, every excuse, every desperate attempt by Vivian's lawyers to create doubt. On the 4th day, Vivian took the stand. She tried to play the victim one last time, the misunderstood woman, the grieving widow, the tragic figure caught in a conspiracy. But the evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. When the prosecution asked her directly about the arsenic purchases, she crumbled. "They deserved it," she hissed, her mask finally completely shattered. Those pathetic old men with their pathetic lives. I gave them purpose. I gave them beauty. And in return, I took what I'd earned. The courtroom erupted. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder, calling for order, and Vivian Ashcroft sealed her own fate. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. 11 murders, conspiracy, fraud. The judge sentenced her to hang. As the constables led her from the courtroom, Vivian looked back one final time at Alara. "You've destroyed me," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. "But you'll never have him. Not really. He'll always wonder what might have been." Alara stood, her voice clear and steady. "No, he'll always be grateful he escaped you. There's a difference." Vivian screamed as they dragged her away, but the sound was already fading, already becoming memory, already becoming nothing. Outside the courthouse, reporters mobbed them. Questions flew like arrows, cameras flashed, voices demanded statements. Rowan pulled Alara close, shielding her from the worst of it. "The Duchess has no comment," he said firmly. "Justice has been served. That's all that matters." They fought through the crowd to their carriage. As they pulled away from the chaos, Alara looked back at the Old Bailey, at the building where Vivian Ashcroft's reign of terror had finally ended, and she felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Free. "It's over," she whispered. Rowan took her hand. "No, it's just beginning." She looked at him, at the man who'd finally seen her, and smiled. "Yes," she agreed. "I suppose it is." The carriage rolled through London's streets, carrying them away from judgment and toward whatever came next. Behind them, society would talk. The scandal sheets would print their versions of the story. History would record its own truth. But Alara didn't care anymore. She'd stepped out of the shadows and into the light. She'd fought a monster and won, and she'd found herself in the process. The Ghost Duchess was dead. Long live the Iron Duchess. Long live Alara Blackmore, who'd refused to be invisible and changed everything. The carriage wheels rumbled over cobblestones as London fell away behind them, giving way to frost-covered countryside. Alara watched the city disappear through the window, feeling the weight of 4 days lift with each passing mile. Rowan's hand remained wrapped around hers, warm and steady. "What are you thinking?" he asked quietly. She turned from the window. "That I should feel triumphant, relieved, something." She paused, searching for the right words. "Instead, I just feel empty, like I've been running on nothing but determination for so long that now that it's over, I don't know what to do with myself." "Rest," he suggested. "You've earned it." "Have I?" She looked down at their joined hands. "Vivian is going to hang because of me. 11 families have their answers, but they still don't have their loved ones back. Helena Marsh fled the country. leaving Catherine and Beatrice orphaned in every way that matters. What exactly have I earned? Justice. Is that enough? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, but it's more than those families had before you stepped into the light. The words settled over her like a blanket, not quite comfort, but acknowledgement at least. They rode in silence until Blackmore Hall appeared on the horizon, its stone walls golden in the afternoon sun. For the first time in 7 years, the sight didn't fill Ilara with dread. Instead, it felt like coming home. The household had assembled to greet them, servants lined up in the courtyard, Mrs. Helmsby at their head with tears streaming down her face. "Your Grace," the housekeeper said, as Ilara descended from the carriage. "We heard the verdict. The whole county's heard. They're saying you're a hero." "I'm not a hero, Mrs. Helmsby. I just did what needed to be done." "That's what heroes always say, ma'am." The older woman's smile was warm despite the tears. "Welcome home." Home. The word resonated differently now. Inside, the great hall felt changed somehow, or perhaps Ilara herself had changed and saw everything through new eyes. The shadows weren't oppressive anymore. The silence wasn't suffocating. It was just a house. Her house. And she could shape it into anything she wanted. "Your Grace?" Pemberton appeared with a silver tray stacked impossibly high with letters. "These arrived during the trial. Congratulations, condolences, requests for interviews, invitations." "Burn the interview requests," Ilara said tiredly. "Set aside the invitations. I'll review them later." "And these?" He indicated a separate stack. "They're from the families, the victims' families." Ilara's breath caught. She took the letters carefully, feeling their weight. "Thank you, Pemberton. That will be all." Alone in the library, she opened the first letter with trembling hands. "Dear Duchess Blackmore, I am Victoria Hartley, sister to Lord James Hartley, who died 7 years ago. I wanted to thank you for giving my family the truth we've sought for so long. My brother's death destroyed us, not just the loss, but the not knowing, the wondering if we'd missed something, if we could have saved him. Now, we know. And while the knowledge brings pain, it also brings peace. James didn't die because we failed him. He died because a monster chose to kill him. And that monster will face justice because of your courage. You gave my brother his name back. You gave our family closure. That is a gift beyond measure." With deepest gratitude, Victoria Hartley Ilara's vision blurred as she read letter after letter. 11 families, all saying variations of the same thing. "Thank you. You gave us answers. You gave us justice. You gave us peace." She didn't realize she was crying until Rowan knelt beside her chair, gently taking the letters from her shaking hands. "It was worth it," he said softly. "Whatever it cost you, whatever it costs you still, it was worth it." "I know." She wiped her eyes. "I just wish it didn't hurt so much." "That's what makes you different from Vivian. She felt nothing. You feel everything. That's not weakness, Ilara. That's strength." She looked at him through tears and saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Love. Not obligation, not duty, not the echo of what he'd felt for someone else. Real, honest, earned love. "Rowan?" A commotion in the hallway interrupted her. Raised voices, Pemberton's stern tones, and then the library door burst open. Catherine Marsh stood in the entrance, windblown and breathless, clutching a telegram. "Your Grace, I'm sorry to intrude, but this just arrived from London." She thrust the paper at Ilara with shaking hands. "It's about Vivian." Ilara's stomach dropped. She unfolded the telegram and read quickly, then read again, certain she'd misunderstood. "What is it?" Rowan asked, his voice sharp with concern. "Vivian is dead." The words felt unreal. "She hanged herself in her cell last night, before they could—" She stopped, the implications crashing over her. Catherine's face had gone white. "She took the coward's way out." "No." Ilara stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "She took control. One last time, she chose her own ending rather than giving society the satisfaction of watching her hang." "Does it matter?" Rowan asked. "Dead is dead. Justice is served either way." "I suppose." But Ilara felt cheated somehow. All that work, all that evidence, all those families waiting for closure, and Vivian had stolen even that final moment from them. As if reading her thoughts, Catherine spoke quietly. At least she's gone. She can't hurt anyone else. True. Alara turned from the window, forcing herself to focus. What will you do now, Catherine, with your mother gone and your sister? Hiding in Bath, last I heard. Catherine's expression was complicated. I don't know. Part of me wants to forgive her. She did bring you the evidence in the end, but another part of me will never forgive her for waiting so long. You don't have to decide today or tomorrow. Forgiveness isn't a debt that needs to be paid on schedule. What about you? Catherine asked. What will you do now that it's over? Alara looked around the library, at the maps and letters and evidence that had consumed her life for weeks, at the house that had been a prison and was now a canvas, at the husband who'd finally learned to see her. I'm going to live, she said simply. Really live. Not survive, not hide, not disappear. Live. Over the next weeks, that's exactly what she did. She dismissed half the servants who'd whispered about her behind closed doors and hired new ones. People who saw the Iron Duchess, not the ghost. She reorganized the estate management, implementing changes she'd wanted to make for years but had been too timid to suggest. She started hosting salons, gatherings of intelligent women who discussed politics, literature, science, anything but gossip. She transformed Blackmore Hall from a mausoleum into a home. And through it all, Rowan was there. Not hovering, not controlling, but present in a way he'd never been before. He asked her opinions on estate matters and actually listened to her answers. He joined her morning rides across the moorlands, no longer disappearing for hours alone. He sat with her in the evenings, reading by the fire, comfortable in shared silence. They were learning each other. 7 years late, but learning nonetheless. One evening, a month after Vivian's death, they sat together in the library as snow fell softly outside. Rowan set down his book. I've been thinking. Dangerous habit, Alara teased gently. The portrait, the one in the gallery, of Vivian. He met her gaze steadily. I want to take it down. Alara's breath caught. Rowan, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Not for you, though I'd be lying if I said your comfort wasn't part of it. But for me. He stood, moving to look out at the snow. I kept it up all these years because I thought the pain meant something. That if I heard enough, it proved what I'd felt was real. That I wasn't a fool for loving her. You weren't a fool. Yes, I was, but not for loving her, for thinking that love meant martyrdom. He turned back to her. Real love isn't about suffering, is it? It's about this, being comfortable in the same room, trusting someone to see you at your worst, choosing someone every day, not because you're obligated, but because you can't imagine not choosing them. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. He crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair. I love you, Alara. Not as a replacement for what I lost, not as a consolation prize. I love you for who you are, sharp, stubborn, brave, impossible. I love you for refusing to be invisible, for saving me from myself, for being real when I'd surrounded myself with ghosts. The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Alara touched his face gently. I love you too. Even though you're damaged and stubborn, and it took you 7 years to notice I existed. He laughed, the sound breaking with emotion. Fair. But Rowan, I need you to understand something. She made him look at her. I'm not the same woman who married you 7 years ago. That woman wanted to be loved so badly she was willing to disappear to get it. This woman, she gestured at herself, this woman won't disappear for anyone. Not even you, especially not you. Good. He pulled her close. I don't want you to disappear. I want you exactly as you are, infuriating, brilliant, and utterly unstoppable. Then we have an understanding. We do. He kissed her then, not gentle this time, but passionate and real and full of 7 years of denied possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alara smiled. Take down the portrait tomorrow, she said. Replace it with something living, something that looks forward instead of back. What did you have in mind? I'll know it when I see it. The next morning, the portrait of Vivian Ashcroft came down from the gallery wall. Rowan didn't burn it or destroy it. That felt too much like giving her power even in death. Instead, He stored it in the attic, wrapped in cloth, just another forgotten relic. The empty space on the wall stayed empty for now. "What should we hang there?" Rowan asked, studying the blank expanse. Alara looked at the space, then at the gallery around them, full of Blackmore ancestors, all stern faces and military medals and old money. "Nothing," she said decisively. "Leave it empty. A reminder that ghosts only have the power we give them." Spring came early that year, melting the snow and bringing the moors to life with new growth. On a bright April morning, Alara received a letter from Catherine. "Dear Duchess, I wanted you to know that I've reconciled with Beatrice. It wasn't easy. There are things between us that may never fully heal, but she's my sister, and Sarah would have wanted us to find our way back to each other. We're using the money from Sarah's inheritance, which Vivian never managed to touch, thank heavens, to establish a foundation. The Sarah Ashcroft Memorial Fund will provide legal assistance to families who suspect a loved one was murdered but lack the resources to investigate. So that what happened to Sarah, what almost didn't get investigated because we were afraid, never happens to another family. It seems fitting, somehow, that Sarah's death, which Vivian meant to be meaningless, will instead save lives. Thank you for teaching me that being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means choosing to act despite the fear." With love and gratitude, Catherine Marsh Alara folded the letter carefully, feeling something settle in her chest. Not closure, exactly, but peace. Vivian had killed 11 people. Those lives were lost, that damage done. But because Catherine had been brave enough to speak up, and Alara had been brave enough to act, how many future lives had been saved? There was no way to know. But it was something. She found Rowan in the stables, overseeing the birth of a foal. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting with a smile that still made her breath catch. "Come see," he said, gesturing her over. "She's perfect." Laura approached carefully, looking down at the gangly newborn struggling to stand on impossibly long legs. "What will you name her?" she asked. "I thought I'd leave that to you. She's yours, after all." "Mine? A gift, for everything you've done, for everything you are." He touched her face gently. "Though I'll admit, a horse seems inadequate compared to what you deserve." Alara looked at the foal, all new life and possibility and stubborn determination to stand despite falling over and over. "Alara," she said softly. "I'll name her Alara." Rowan laughed. "After yourself?" "After the woman I became. The one who kept standing up no matter how many times she fell." She touched his hand. "And maybe someday our daughter will ride her." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Rowan went very still. "Our daughter? Or son? Someday, if you want." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm just saying we have time now to build something real, to become a family instead of two strangers sharing a name." "I want that." His voice was rough with emotion. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time." "Good. Then let's start living like we believe in tomorrow." They stood together in the warm stable, watching the foal finally find her legs, and Alara felt the last piece of the past 7 years fall away. She was no longer the Ghost Duchess. She was no longer even the Iron Duchess. She was just Alara. Complicated, flawed, strong, real. And that was enough. That summer, Blackmore Hall hosted its first grand party in 7 years. Not a masquerade, not a cold, formal affair, but a genuine celebration of life, of justice, of new beginnings. The families of Vivian's victims came, all 11 of them, Lady Thornberry and her network of allies. Magistrate Cordwell, now retired and looking more relaxed than Alara had ever seen him. Catherine and Beatrice Marsh, together despite everything. Even the villagers of Morton were invited, mixing with society in a way that would have been scandalous 7 years ago. But Alara didn't care about scandal anymore. As the sun set over the moorlands, painting everything gold and crimson, she stood on the terrace watching her guests laugh and dance and live. Rowan appeared beside her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Quite a party," he observed. "Isn't it? Mrs. Helmsby says the cook is beside herself trying to keep up with demand." "Good problems to have." He handed her a glass, then raised his. "I'd like to make a toast." "Here? Just the 2 of us?" "Especially the 2 of us." His eyes were warm in the fading light. "To my wife, who stepped out of the shadows and changed everything. who refused to be invisible even when the world tried to erase her, who saved my life in every way a person can be saved. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. Rowan. To Alara Blackmore, he continued, the bravest person I've ever known, and the love of my life. They clinked glasses, the sound pure and clear in the summer air. Now you, Rowan prompted. Alara thought about 7 years ago, a frightened girl in a cold marriage, trying so hard to disappear she almost succeeded. She thought about the night at the masquerade, stepping into the light for the first time. She thought about the trial, the victory, the peace that followed. And she thought about now, standing on her own terrace, in her own home, beside a man who finally saw her. To survival, she said softly, and to everything that comes after. They drank as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared. Below them, music drifted up from the ballroom. Someone called for Rowan to make a speech. Alara heard Catherine's laugh ring out, bright and genuine. We should go down, Rowan said. They'll be wondering where we are. Let them wonder. Alara set down her glass and took his hand. Dance with me first. Here, just us. There's no music. Yes, there is. Listen. They stood very still, and Alara heard it. The wind through the moors, the distant laughter from the house, the rustle of summer leaves, the music of a life fully lived. Rowan pulled her close, and they danced on the terrace as darkness fell and the world went on without them. For the first time in 7 years, Alara felt completely, perfectly present, not worried about tomorrow, not haunted by yesterday, just here, just now, just this. Happy? Rowan murmured against her hair. She thought about it honestly. Yes, scared sometimes, tired often, but happy. Good. That's all I want for you. What about what you want for yourself? This. He held her tighter. Just this. You, me, and enough time to make up for what we lost. We have time, Alara assured him, all the time in the world. They danced until the music from the ballroom called them back. Hand in hand, they descended the terrace steps and rejoined the party. Society watched them enter together, the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore, finally, truly united, and whispers rippled through the crowd. But they weren't cruel whispers anymore. They were awestruck. Look at them. Look at what they survived. Look at what they became. Lady Thornbury caught Alara's eye from across the room and raised her glass in salute. Magistrate Cordwell bowed slightly, respect clear in his expression. Catherine Marsh smiled, her eyes bright with tears of joy. And Alara realized something profound. She'd spent 7 years trying to earn approval, trying to disappear, trying to be enough. But she'd had it backwards. Approval didn't come from making yourself small. It came from standing tall and daring the world to knock you down. And when the world tried, because it always would, you stood back up. Again and again and again, until finally the world stopped trying to knock you down and started applauding instead. Duchess Blackmore, someone called. A speech! Tell us how you did it! The crowd took up the chant, Speech, speech, speech! Alara looked at Rowan, who squeezed her hand encouragingly. She stepped forward, and the room fell silent. All eyes on her, all attention focused, no longer invisible, never invisible again. I'm not one for speeches, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. But I'll tell you this. 7 years ago, I came to Blackmore Hall as a girl who thought making herself small would keep her safe, who thought if she just disappeared enough, maybe someday someone would notice her. She paused, looking around at faces she knew and faces she didn't. I was wrong. Safety doesn't come from hiding. It comes from standing in the light and refusing to be moved. From choosing truth even when lies are easier. From fighting for what's right even when the whole world says you're wrong. Catherine was crying openly now, Beatrice beside her, equally moved. A monster came into our lives, Alara continued. She took 11 innocent people. She nearly destroyed more. She would have continued if no one had stopped her. Her voice strengthened. But someone did stop her. Not me alone. All of us. Everyone in this room who chose truth over comfort, who chose justice over silence. She found Rowan's eyes in the crowd. So I don't want to be celebrated for bringing down Vivian Ashcroft. That was just one battle. What I want, what I hope for, is that we all remember what we learned. that silence protects monsters, that good people who do nothing enable evil, that sometimes the only way to survive is to fight. The room was utterly still. "We survived," Alara said softly. "All of us. We survived loss, betrayal, manipulation, lies. We survived and we're still standing. That's what I want to celebrate tonight. Not victory over one person, but survival itself. The stubborn, beautiful, messy act of continuing to live despite everything trying to destroy you." She raised her glass high. "To survival, to truth, to everyone who's ever felt invisible and chose to step into the light anyway. And to the future, may it be brighter than the past." The room erupted in cheers. Glasses clinked, voices shouted agreement, someone started singing, and others joined in. Rowan appeared at her side, pulling her close as the celebration swirled around them. "That was perfect," he said. "It was honest." "Same thing." They stood together as the party raged on into the night. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of a cold marriage and built something real from the ruins. Hours later, after the last guest had departed and the servants had retired, Alara and Rowan stood alone in the great hall. Moonlight streamed through the windows, painting everything silver. "Ready for bed?" Rowan asked. "Not yet." Alara moved to the staircase, looking up at the portraits of Blackmore ancestors lining the walls. "Do you think we'll end up there someday? Stern faces watching future generations?" "Probably. In 100 years, some descendant will point at us and say, 'That's the Duke and Duchess who survived the Ashcroft scandal.'" "Is that how we'll be remembered? For scandal?" "No." Rowan joined her on the stairs, looking at the portraits with new eyes. "We'll be remembered for surviving it, for refusing to let it define us, for building something real from ashes." Alara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "I like that version better." "Me too." They climbed the stairs together, past ancestors who'd never known the kind of partnership they'd built, past portraits of cold marriages and strategic alliances and duty without love. At the top of the stairs, Rowan paused. "Your chambers or mine?" The question was simple, the implications were enormous. 7 years of separate rooms, 7 years of distance. Alara smiled. "Ours." They walked down the corridor to the master suite, the one that had stood empty for 7 years because neither of them had felt entitled to claim it. Rowan opened the door, and they stepped inside together. The room was beautiful, untouched, waiting. "We'll have to redecorate," Alara observed. "Make it ours instead of just another museum piece." "Tomorrow," Rowan said, pulling her close. "Tonight, let's just be here, together, finally." She kissed him as moonlight spilled across the floor and felt the last wall between them crumble. They were no longer two strangers sharing a name. They were partners, equals, lovers. They were home. Later, much later, as Rowan slept beside her, Alara rose and moved to the window. The moorland stretched endlessly beyond the estate, silver in the moonlight. Wild and beautiful and unbroken. Like her, she'd survived 7 years of invisibility, a murderer's schemes, society's judgment, and her own fear. She'd stepped into the light and refused to be moved. She'd won. Not just against Vivian, against every expectation that had tried to make her small, against every voice that had said she was nothing, against the ghost she'd almost become. Alara Whitcomb Blackmore stood at the window of her home, in the life she'd fought for, and felt power settle into her bones. Not borrowed power, not temporary power, real power, earned power, the kind that couldn't be taken away, the power of someone who'd survived the impossible and come out stronger. Behind her, Rowan murmured something in his sleep. She turned back to the bed, looking at the man who'd finally learned to see her, and she smiled. 7 years ago, she'd been a girl desperate to be loved. Now she was a woman who knew her own worth. 7 years ago, she'd married a ghost. Now she was married to a man who was finally, beautifully alive. 7 years ago, she'd thought survival meant disappearing. Now she knew better. Survival meant standing tall, fighting back, refusing to quit, and in the end, not just surviving, but thriving. Alara climbed back into bed, tucking herself against Rowan's warmth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, in this moment, in this bed, in this life she'd built from ashes, she was enough. She was real. She was unstoppable. The ghost Duchess was dead. Long live Elara Blackmore. Survivor, fighter, iron-willed and unbreakable, and finally, blessedly, impossibly, happy. Outside, the wind swept across the moors, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. Inside Blackmore Hall, two people who'd been strangers slept wrapped in each other's arms, dreaming of a future they'd fought so hard to claim. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the estate that had once been a prison, Elara would wake to a life she'd earned, not given, not borrowed, not stolen, earned, through courage and truth and stubborn refusal to be broken. That was power. That was victory. That was everything.